little horn, geographical location of Antichrist, then, as the Fathers delight to call him, or the little horn, is to be sought among the 10 kingdoms of the Western Roman Empire. I say of the Western Roman Empire, because that was properly the body of the fourth beast, Greece, and the countries which lay eastward of Italy, belong to the third beast, for the former beasts were still subsisting, though their dominion was taken away. As concerning the rest of the beasts, saith Daniel, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Dan 7:12. And therefore, as Sir Isaac Newton rightly infers, all the 4 beasts are still alive, though the dominion of the 3 first be taken away. The nations of Chaldea and Assyria are still the first beast. Those of Media and Persia are still the second beast. Those of Macedon, Greece, and Thrace, Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt, are still the third. And those of Europe, on this side Greece, are still the fourth. Seeing therefore the body of the third beast is confined to the nations on this side the river Euphrates, and the body of the fourth beast is confined to the nations on this side Greece, we are to look for all the 4 heads of the third beast among the nations on this side the river Euphrates, and for all the 11 horns of the fourth beast, among the nations on this side of Greece. And therefore, at the breaking up of the Greek Empire into 4 kingdoms of the Greeks, we include no part of the Chaldeans, Medes, and Persians in those kingdoms, because they belong to the bodies of the 2 first beasts. Dissertations on the Prophecies / Thomas Newton, D. pp. 239, 240. London, B. Blake, 1840. Little horn, identification of, with the papacy. The main points in the nature, character, and actings of this little horn, which we must note in order to discover the power intended, are these: 1. Its place, within the body of the Fourth Empire. 2. The period of its origin, soon after the division of the Roman territory into 10 kingdoms. 3. Its nature, different from the other kingdoms, though in some respects like them. It was a horn, but with eyes and mouth. It would be a kingdom like the rest, a monarchy, but its kings would be overseers or bishops and prophets. 4. Its moral character, boastful and blasphemous, great words spoken against the Most High. 5. Its lawlessness, it would claim authority over times and laws. 6. Its opposition to the saints, it would be a persecuting power, and that for so long a period that it would wear out the saints of the Most High, who would be given into its hand for a time. 7. Its duration, times, and a half, or 1260 years. 8. Its doom, it would suffer the loss of its dominion before it was itself destroyed. They shall take away its dominion, to consume and destroy it to the end. Here are 8 distinct and perfectly tangible features. If they all meet in one great reality, if we find them all characterizing one and the same power, can we question that that is the power intended? They do all meet in the Roman papacy. And we are therefore bold to say it is the great and evil reality predicted, Romanism and the Reformation. H. R. Ratton Guinness, D. F. R. A. S. P. 26, London, J. Nisbet & Co., 1891. Let me inquire, can anyone suggest any other power in which all these marks, or the majority of them, meet? They are 8 in number, indefinite in character. The prophecy lays its finger on the place where we are to find the great enemy, Rome, on the point of time in the course of history at which we may expect to see him arise, the division of the Roman territory into a commonwealth of kingdoms. It specifies the nature of the power, political ecclesiastical, its character, blasphemously self-exalting, lawless, and persecuting. It measures its duration minus 1260 years, and specifies its doom, to have its dominion gradually consumed and taken away, and then to be suddenly destroyed forever, because of its blasphemous assumptions, by the epiphany and glory of the Son of Man, introducing the kingdom of God on earth. The proof that the papacy is the power intended is strictly cumulative. If it answered to one of these indications, there would be a slight presumption against it; if to several, a strong one; if to the majority, an overwhelming one; while if it answer to all, then the proof that it is the power intended becomes to candid minds irresistible. There is not a single clause in the prophecy that cannot be proved to fit the Roman papacy exactly, except the last, which is not yet fulfilled. Id. pp. 42, 43. Little horn, 14 marks of Popery is here found, in the 7th chapter of Daniel, completely described by 13 or 14 marks. I will try to make you understand how, at each of these marks, we are forced to exclaim, not only, this is indeed the Pope, but, there is nothing under the sun, nor in the history of all ages, to which these divine descriptions can be applied, unless to the Pope, it can be nothing else than the Pope. First mark. The nature itself of the power prefigured by the little horn. Plainly, according to the prophecy, this must be a priest king. It is a king, for it is written, the little horn came up among the other 10, and another king shall arise after the 10. It is a priest king, for it is written that it shall be diverse from the other kings, and all that follows is designed to tell us in what it shall be diverse, and to show it to us at once in a political and a religious character. Where will you find, in the whole history of the world, unless in Popery, a priest king who has pretended to change times and laws, who has reigned with power, and who has made war upon the saints? Second mark. You have here, too, the geography of this power. Where must we seek for the little horn? Where is its holy see? Where its lands, its patrimony, the domain of the Church? Where must we place the theater of its baleful operations? No point is clearer in this prophecy. The prophecy is given on purpose to point you to the Roman monarchy, to locate this holy see in Rome, these lands of the Church in Italy, and this theater of a wicked power in the vast empire of the 10 Latin kingdoms. Third mark. The origin of this power, and the nature of its growth. How did it come into the world? Slowly, little by little, by constant increase, as the horn grows on the head of a bullock. And now inquire of all historians if this is not an exact description of the origin of the papal tyranny. Fourth mark. The chronology of this apostasy, by which I mean to say the time of its commencement and of its end. When ought it to commence? According to Daniel, this is a striking mark. According to the vision, it is immediately after the division of the Latin Empire into its 10 Gothic kingdoms, that is to say, toward the 6th or 7th century, and, according to the same vision, this divided state must continue till the coming of Christ. Now I ask if it is possible to find anywhere but in the papacy the least solution to so clear and distinct a problem. Fifth mark. The territorial acquisitions of this power. Here is something marvelous. 3 of the first horns, says Daniel, verse 8, were plucked up before the little horn, and these horns John represents to us as each wearing a crown. Take now a map of Italy, look for the Pope's domains, and in India how many of the 10 kingdoms the pontifical territory now occupies. You will see that it has supplanted 3. Sixth mark. The extraordinary sagacity, consummate skill, incomparable policy, constant vigilance of this power. What has given Rome her power for 1200 years is the superhuman sagacity, that perpetual policy, of which the eye is emblematical. Seventh mark. Its deceivableness, its falsehoods and lying wonders. This is a striking mark, and without a parallel in history. To this head we must refer the false legends, false books, false relics, the wonder-working medals, false cures, and more especially the false decretals. Eighth mark. It's more than royal pomp. Daniel tells us, verse 20, that although this horn was the least, his look was more stout than his fellows. The pomps of Charlemagne, Charles V, Louis XIV, and Bonaparte were very great, but were they comparable to that of the Roman pontiff? The greatest kings were obliged to hold his stirrup, to serve him at table. What do I say? To prostrate themselves before him, and to kiss his feet. He was even seen to put upon their necks his arrogant foot. Ninth mark. Its language, its great, swelling words. The little horn had a mouth, says Daniel, and this mouth spake very great things. Let the most superficial scholar in history, in one of our schools, be asked to search, in the whole course of the 900 years of the Dark Ages and the 400 years of modern history, for the power which has unceasingly filled the world with the noise of his great, swelling words, words of threatening, words of pride, words of command, words of cursing, and also words of fire, sending the nations obedient to him on remote expeditions and exterminating wars. Is there a schoolboy who would not at once reply, "It is the Pope, it can only be the Pope"? In this respect, then, the Pope is without his like in history. 10th mark. The duration of this language, according to Daniel, it must last till the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of heaven. And you see, gentlemen, it lasts still. Who could have believed beforehand that in Europe, after so much civilization, after the blessed Reformation, after 1200 years of scandals, a priest king in Rome could continue with impunity such language among the nations. 11th mark. It's blasphemies. Daniel says, verse 25, he shall utter blasphemies against the Most High. But where is there anything more blasphemous than the pretensions of the Roman pontiff, to call himself the Holy Father, the name which Jesus gives to his Father, the Most Holy Father, the Church's spouse, the head of the universal Church, the incommunicable name of the only Son of God, to call himself His Holiness, to declare himself infallible, to dare to put his decrees above even the word of his God, to pretend to release men from the commands of their Creator, to maintain that he alone creates priests, who alone, in their turn, create their God in a bit of bread, by 4 Latin words, that he may be eaten by the people, to pardon sins committed against the Lord of Lords, to open to men at his pleasure the gates of heaven. Are these blasphemies enough on the part of a worm of the dust? 12th mark. His homicidal hatred and his persecutions of true Christians. Daniel tells us, verse 21, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, and he adds, verse 25, he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Alas, here the voice of history responds loudly to that of prophecy. All its pages, even to that of the last century, when it speaks of the popes, show them to you as persecuting men who would live according to the word of God, and putting them to death like sheep for the slaughter. 13th mark. His audacious heresies. This perhaps is the most striking mark of all, and one in which the Roman pontiff has never had his equal. Daniel says of the little horn, that the king diverse from the other 10 shall think to change times and laws. This denotes the unparalleled attempt which the Pope has made upon the law of his God. He pretended to change it in its sovereignty, in its sanction, in its use, in its contents, in its morals, and in its doctrine. 14th and last mark. The exact duration of his persecutions against the people of God. Daniel and John declare several times that it shall be until a time and times and the dividing of time, or 1260 prophetic days, which are taken, with strong reason, for so many years. Who would have believed beforehand that a priest king so violent, so proud, so cruel, so blasphemous, so contrary to the Scriptures and so well described by them, so outrageous against nations and kings, would last 12 years. But the Holy Spirit tells us that it shall last 1260, and this was so. Lastly, gentlemen, the same prophecies have also foretold its judgment and its overthrow. I do not mean to go into this subject, but I love to call it to your minds in conclusion, for your encouragement. Read the words of Daniel, the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Gentlemen, this sketch of the 7th chapter of Daniel will suffice, I trust, to let you see with what abundant evidence the Scriptures establish the doctrine which I desired to bring before you. Extracts from a lecture by L. O. Lawson, D.D., Professor of Theology, delivered in the School of Theology at Geneva, October 3, 1843. Little Horn, Historical Evidence Concerning. Let us now, finally, review the historical evidence, and compare it with these features of the little horn which the prophecy unfolds. And first, the little horn was to arise on the body of the fourth beast, in contrast with the first, second, or third. The papacy has had its permanent seat among the western kingdoms of Europe, and within the territory which belongs exclusively to the Fourth or Roman Empire. The little horn appears in the vision, when the separation of the Fourth Empire has begun, and next in order after the mention of those 10 kingdoms or horns which were to obtain the chief power in the broken monarchy. The rise of the papacy, in like manner, followed close upon the fall of the Western Empire and the rise of the barbarian kingdoms. The dominion of the little horn, in the prophecy, is the one main event which marks the history of the Fourth Empire, after its division. By the confession of all the best historians, the rise, the supremacy, and the decline of the papacy, is the one center around which we have to arrange, for 12 centuries, the history of the European kingdoms. To prepare the way of the little horn, 3 of the horns before it are uprooted. After the fall of the empire, exactly 3 dynasties, and no more, were uprooted to make way for the temporal sovereignty of the Bishop of Rome. The 11th horn, though vast in its claims and pretensions, was to be small in size. The popedom has in like manner, in its outward form, been always one of the least among the European kingdoms, while its sovereigns have claimed and exercised a supreme dominion over the whole. The little horn is diverse from all the rest, for it has eyes like those of a man, and an articulate voice. The papacy by its own laws claims a princedom more perfect than every human princedom, and surpassing them as far as the light of the sun exceeds the light of the moon. It claims the office of a seer, who has full insight into divine mysteries, and of a prophet, an infallible interpreter of the divine will. All its decisions are to be so received, as if they were confirmed by the voice of the divine Peter himself. Its decrees are given, auctoritate, scientia, ac plenitudine, with the fullness of divine knowledge, and the fullness also of apostolic power. The mouth of the little horn was to speak great words against the Most High. The Pope declares, in his own solemn and authorized decrees, that it is certain that he is styled God, and it is manifest that God cannot be judged by man. He further pronounces concerning himself, that he is received into the fellowship of Christ's undivided unity. The little horn is further to wear out the saints of the Most High. The words will apply either to delusion or oppression. Now Pelagius, and his successors ever since, have laid down these 3 maxims, that it is schism to deny the supremacy or disobey the mandates of the Roman See, that schism ought to be punished by the secular power, and that these powers ought to be urged and compelled to exterminate and root out all such schismatics from their dominions. From that time onward the only alternative allowed by the papacy to the saints has been sin or suffering, the submission to an impious claim, wearing out the conscience and wasting the spiritual life, or the open penalties of confiscation, imprisonment, torture, and death. pp. 253-255. The little horn, further, shall think to change times. The description applies, in all its force, to the systematic perversion of God's words by which all the promises of millennial glory are wrested from their true sense, and referred to the dominion and grandeur of the Church of Rome. pp. 257-258. Finally, the little horn thinks to change laws. pp. 258. Thus every feature of the prophecy finds its full counterpart in the Constitution, decrees, and history of the Roman Popedom, and hence we may gather, with a firm and assured conviction, that this is the true meaning of the vision, designed from the very first by the all-seeing Spirit of God. p. 259, The 4 Prophetic Empires, Rev. T. R. Burks, M.A., pages 253-259, 2d edition, London, Seeley, Burnside, and Seeley, 1845.